got apologies from Councillor David Adams and Councillor Joe Lever, and we've got Councillor Claire Critchison standing in for Councillor Adams.
Welcome, Councillor Critchison. Previous minutes, everybody okay to agree to a proposer and a seconder? Yeah, take your pick of seconders. Go. Any declarations of interest this evening? Okay. Again, no public questions, so we'll move on. First excitement. Progress update. Leave on the floating bridge. Who's taking that one? Oh, that will be exciting. In that case, I think it's probably an opportunity to allow members of the committee to put forward any questions of scrutiny they would like an answer to. So feel free. Councillor Payne.
Obviously, we all now know the outcome of the mediation process in regards to the floating bridge. I just think it's quite disappointing in a sense that this committee weren't informed first. We've been waiting since January, for an update on the situation. We now know that an agreement has been made on it, but why weren't we informed first about the process that was underway? If they were expecting this to go to a non-disclosure, which has happened now, and what the steps are going forward. Councillor Jordan alluded to there being a possibility of a new floating bridge, but none of that's been confirmed. So it's disappointing not to see him here to be able to answer these questions and let us know what process took place for this outcome to happen and not, the finance not be made public. And I guess another question is, how will this figure of money be hidden within a council budget when that is up to the public to see and for the council to see for public scrutiny?
Do you want to frame those as questions, Cameron? Because I think it's very important that doesn't get lost. Also, because we need to then decide what outcomes we want and whether we need to go through a formal or informal briefing, which we're happiest with.
So the first question would be, can the cabinet member or a colleague confirm what process took place through the mediation? Why was it that a non-disclosure agreement was made? Why was this committee not made informed first of this decision before it going out to the media? And what further action is going forward? Obviously, a new floating bridge has been alluded to. Can the cabinet member or colleagues confirm the situation with that?
Thank you. Did you capture that? You okay? Yeah, I've got Councillor Lilly, then Councillor Quirk.
Can I just say, I do know personally that Councillor Jordan is not able to be here because there are family members in hospital, and he's got genuine reasons to not actually be here. No.
Councillor Quirk.
I think it was inappropriate the way that we all found out about this through the media and press release rather than through a briefing beforehand. So one thing I would like is an assurance that in the future councillors will be alerted before the media are of things happening, at least at the same time. Certainly one media outlet quite clearly had a pre-briefing on the subject. There's clearly a critical decision made here, not at the point that you say this officer is going to be responsible, but at the point probably that you say these are the parameters within which you're going to operate. Critical decisions should be notified to the full council. It still hasn't been notified. I hope that it will be notified to the full council at the council meeting next week. I would like to see the timeline, not the outcome of the decisions, but know when the officer was given the brief that he was going to be responsible. At some stage, he must have been given a brief that said, you can work within this. We'd be unhappy if you go below this level. I would really like to go to that level. At that stage, I think a critical decision was made. It should have been notified. Certainly, when the announcement was made that it's been fixed, this notification to all councillors formally through the council chamber is appropriate.
Thank you, Councillor
So
Quirk.
can we have that timeline, please?
You captured that as questions, yeah. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. 2 weeks ago, a note was circulated to me, you, Chair, Councillor Quirk, it was group leaders plus Councillor Quirk who stood in for me at an informal briefing. And there was a note that was given to us which set out some detail, set out key things like who gave the delegated authority for the mediation to start, the date that was given, who had the authority to settle the mediation and the date they took that decision, and some other bits and pieces in there. This is not confidential information, but that note had a confidential watermark. And I asked the responsible officer Monday a week ago, so 6 working days, could I please show this to other councillors? There is nothing special about group leaders. There's nothing special about Councillor Quirk standing in for me. And I haven't heard. And I think it's really worrying when this council calls information confidential when it's not, and when they don't get back and clarify questions over 6 working days. It's a perfectly easy question to answer, because I think at the least all councillors should see that, and actually the public should see it. It's a delegated decision date. It's not controversial. So it leads to people worrying about what was actually agreed if people won't be open with us about the basics. Councillor Jordan was copied into that, and he obviously, for whatever reason, hasn't taken upon himself to sort of encourage the officer. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but I'd like to know some answers to some basic questions, and I think all councillors should see basic information that some of us have been shown, but not others.
It's a fair point. Councillor Quirk.
Just a quick one. We know that a delegated decision was made. It would be very good to know who made it. Was it delegated to an officer who made the decision? Was it made by the appropriate cabinet member? Or was it made by the leader of the council? Somebody made the decision to accept this. I think we should know who made that decision.
Well, Councillor Quirk, you and I do know, because it's in the note. I don't know whether the cabinet have seen it. They're not copied into the note. The leader is, and Councillor Jordan as the cabinet member responsible, group leaders and Councillor Quirk. And that note has been circulated since Friday 2 weeks ago, so 8 working days. And I asked 6 working days ago, could councillors see this? No response from Councillor Jordan and no response from the officer.
Okay, it's a fair point. So again, another question is bear in mind how the current information has been circulated. Can councillors see it? It's not ideal, I agree. Councillor Lilly.
Can I ask, it's a technical question probably to Mr. Thistlewood, Paul. In the past, there would be a paper that listed delegated decisions, particular delegated decisions by cabinet members, and that then enabled this the scrutiny committees, or particularly the corporate scrutiny committee. I'm sure Councillor Kirk will remember this, to then actually call in that decision if they felt that it needs to be scrutinised. And actually this committee on several occasions called in delegated decisions. So if there is a delegated decision, I think it is a question to ask, where was it actually published? Because if I'm right, this committee could call that delegated decision into scrutiny.
Yes, Chair. Previously, there had been the ability where there were cabinet member decisions made under delegated powers. They were subject to the call-in provision. I know the council's monitoring officer has been looking at this particular issue, so I don't know whether members would want to hear from him as to the process involved and future steps.
Yes, can we?
Thank you. That one works.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Councillor Lilly, for the question, etc. Certainly, sort of delegated decisions, whether made by members or officers, need to be made available for public inspection, and also they need to be available and put on the website. Now, in terms of the previous practice before this committee, obviously I'm in the hands of members as to whether or not previously lists have been put forward expressly in front of this committee. Certainly the suggestion, to my mind, would make sense to have it brought expressly in front of you as a committee. So you can look at what decisions have been made and take whatever action you feel you'd like to take, because there's a way of bringing it regularly to the committee itself. Again, I don't know how that operated in practice in the past and why it has sort of stopped and when it stopped, etc. But it would seem to be quite a sensible idea to ensure that, irrespective of right to inspect, irrespective of publication on the websites or whatever, there's absolutely a list specifically on your agenda papers as a fail-safe.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Drew, then Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to have it confirmed as to whether one of the companies, one of the negotiating partners, is in liquidation? Is that something we may be able to have confirmed tonight? Absolutely. And if that is the case, my understanding is that that company has failed for a number of years to file its accounts with Companies House. So a wider question would be, what is the due diligence behind that, and why seemingly has it failed so catastrophically, lending the council to such a precarious position with a negotiating partner? And I think it also potentially opens questions about the directors' duties of that company. They have obviously a responsibility not to dispose of assets when a company is in liquidation. That's going to be a public question, something that's going to be ventilated potentially at an open court. How that therefore reconciles itself with the secrecy surrounding the council's financial position and the negotiation. Thank you.
Councillor Lilly.
I just wanted to put forward the proposal that we actually do have a list of those delegated decisions. We used to have them in the past. They did come to the scrutiny. I used to be vice chair of corporate scrutiny. We had that, and that gave the opportunity for members to call in those decisions if we felt that they needed to be scrutinised. It worked well. I had the highest score of call-ins, I think, in doing that. And I think we need that back on the scrutiny. So along with the forward plan, we have a list of delegated decisions. Some of those decisions might be by officers, they might be by members or cabinet members, but we should, within a cabinet system, have the opportunity to call them in, and you will then have a specific meeting. That's what we did in the past, just about that issue. You didn't have it on an agenda, you just had that call-in. And it seems that the call-in process of delegated decisions has fallen off the radar, and I think we should have it back.
So do you want to make a formal proposal?
I propose that we bring back the scrutiny of delegated decisions back to the committee. I look for a seconder.
Cameron Palin.
Hmm.
Those in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Any against?
9 chairman in favour, none against. Chairman.
Any abstentions, just in case? No, very good. Thank you, Councillor Lilly. I'll suggest we do move on, because in the face of we won't get any direct answers this evening, is that's a good list of scrutiny-based questions, of which I think we're all desperate to answers on. The only thing to decide is how we would get those responses. Are we happy with an informal briefing, which may mean we can be party to more information, or do you want it to be part of a formal corporate scrutiny committee? Councillor Robertson.
Chair, do you think we could do what sometimes you do with health scrutiny, which is to have an informal briefing first, but then to have it on the agenda in an open meeting?
I'm happy with that, if everyone else is happy with that. Yeah. Take that as a yes. Okay, moving on to committee, and thank you for that. Moving on to committee's work plan. You've had a chance to glance at the forward plan and the work plan. They're in good order. You've done well as a committee. We've got this all in good order. This is very, exciting as far as scrutiny goes. The only thing to note in 6B is the community safety has been pushed to March 23 due to staffing issues, I believe. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman.
It's not been ignored, it's just moved on. Is there anything anybody else has spotted, wants to add, or you think needs questioning? Don't feel you have to.
On the work plan.
Whichever you
The
want,
forward.
Michael. Forward plan and then the work programme, yeah.
About page 7 on the forward plan. I didn't understand on bereavement services business model what abandoned meant.
It's incorrect wording, it should just be delayed.
Sorry?
Incorrect wording should just be
Okay,
delayed. Is that
delayed.
correct?
Okay.
That's correct, Chairman. Yeah.
So the second question then, Chair, is when is it coming to the committee?
We are awaiting further advice on that, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
We're on it. Anything else? No? Excellent. Moving on then, item 7, impact of the cost of living crisis. Is this you, Councillor Stevens?
It's me and my team, Chairman.
It's good to hear. Have we got a presentation or is it verbal?
Pardon?
Have we got a glossy presentation or is it just verbal?
No, it's going to be verbal, but at each juncture, I will be calling on certain members of our senior staff here who have been pulling together and contributing to the anti-poverty measures across the island and including all stakeholders. So that's where I want to be. I've also got Suzanne Smith of Hampshire County Children's Services online, I believe, and I will be asking her to infill on the food pantries, etc., and an update on that and where we're going. Likewise with Laura Gordian, our adult social care director, we'll be asking Laura to give us information on the mobile hub that is being introduced to support those areas more remote around our island. And I will also obviously be including Chris Ashman, who is our Director of Regeneration, who once again has been pulling this together. So that you can have a good overview. They've given up their time this evening to come along, give information out, take questions and give you a rounded picture of what we've got at the moment with regards to our statutory scrutiny position and indeed our voluntary sector. So what I want to say is, from my point of view, that we've come a long way in a very short time, but we were down the track anyway because of what was brought together under our cross-island support for the pandemic, which was in place and supported our island very well. We could actually latch into that and continue to utilise those areas and those stakeholders which were already there. And that's one of these elements which we wouldn't have really wanted, but to be honest, it's given us a head start. And that is down to what was contributed prior to my taking the role over as anti-poverty cabinet member, but it was also down to what was brought into play from the previous administration, who quite honestly did a good job and was well supported across chamber at the time by myself and other colleagues from prior to our taking over the administration. So to be quite candid, it's been quite a journey, but I think that what we have actually proven in the Isle of Wight Council is that we're not working in silos. With this area of work, we've actually worked through departments, across departments and various services to bring forward quite a good coverage, and hopefully we are trying to, because of our lack of finance in the local authority, we are trying to pull things together in a more meaningful manner so that we make every pound that we spend and every pound that the voluntary sector spend worth its weight in gold. So I think that that's also very good. What I would say is that you know, I've gone up to Pan together with Councillor Brodie and indeed Ian Lloyd to talk to Pan together and seeing what they're doing. And you'll be surprised at the innovation that is going on in those areas. And they really are supporting at grassroots level. On that, I'm going to say that both Ian and myself have been invited to, I think it's November the 18th, to the Riverside Centre, when there will be a meeting down there and a session down there. I shall be speaking down there along with Ian. And so once again, you know, it's out there, it's open, and and to be quite honest, it's well supported. If you've got time to come along on that day down at Riverside Centre, I'd be pleased to see you, because don't forget, you're representing your community, which is part of this island-wide. What I'm going to say is, really, we've started to bring together, or pull together even closer, the Footprint Trust. We've allocated some funding from the Isle of Wight Council to assist with mentoring and giving support to those who have difficulty in filling out their applications for energy assistance or welfare, for that. If not welfare, it's what's there for them. So excuse me for that statement, but it's money that's available to people that reach the criteria, and if we can assist every islander that is in need of support, then we're doing a good job. Footprint Trust with Ray Harrington Vale doing a very, very good job in that area. What I would also say is that CAB with Paul Saville, once again, they're doing well. They're doing very well. They've brought together a website, and that website, I've got to find it, I'll Find It is the name of the website. So if you go on there, you'll find what opportunities there are for support and areas where you can actually speak to an individual, because let's face it, not everyone is computer literate. Not everyone can fire a mouse around a pad and come up with the right options. So we need these people at the end of the telephone line who can actually assist our residents and those in need. What I would like to do is just take 2 seconds out just to go over to our DAS and just say, can we please talk a little bit about the mobile hub and what that's going to achieve, please, Laura?
I can. Unfortunately, technology failed me not once but twice there. So with some hard work on the part of our partners at Living Well, part of Aspire, we've been able to source a mobile hub to access parts of our community that we sometimes find harder to reach for whatever reason. The purpose of the hub is to support families and individuals through the distribution of hot and cold drinks, food to communities and to vulnerable people, as well as providing support, advice and information around how they can help or be helped in certain circumstances where poverty is impacting upon them and their day-to-day life. Whilst we're deploying the van at this moment in time when we're seeing the cost of living increasing significantly, it's intended to be a longer term and more sustainable option for our communities. And we'll be able to utilise this service, or this addition to the Living Well Early Help Service, in times where we see water shortages or floods or other incidents that impact on island communities. Living Well are using their own chefs and their own catering facilities, which are already established. They're providing educational resources and also a support worker to assist people. But key to the offer is this isn't intended to create a dependency. This service isn't supporting people all day, every day. It's in different parts of the island at different times, providing a level of support that people need. That support can include visiting people in their own homes, helping them to understand how night storage heaters work, for an example, or distributing blankets and warm clothing during exceptionally cold periods of time. So some real practical and hands-on support as well as advice and information. The van has arrived. I have a picture of it. I can try and share it if that would be useful, if you're interested in seeing it, but it's fully kitted out and the service went live on the 1st of November. It has been a soft launch because what's been really important is to make sure that the Living Well Early Help Service are able to integrate themselves into support offers that are already available in community. What we don't want to do is duplicate things. We want to make sure that we're targeting the right communities to be able to have maximum impact with that support. So whilst there's been no great fanfare that it is live, we're confident that they're linking in with other community groups that are already in existence to provide as much support as we possibly can to vulnerable island residents at this time.
Got a pictorial. Going to bring Chris Ashman in a moment. Okay. There's a view. If you see that on the road, you'll know that it's out there in the districts. So you can see we're moving forward with not just supplying support from within Isle of Wight Council, but out on the roads and out on the roads with outreach work. I'd bring in Chris Ashman now. I just want him to update on where we are with our warm spaces. And if you could update on the warm spaces, Chris, I know that we've got some.
Thank you, Councillor. And in addition to the mobile hub, obviously, our main contribution has been to coordinate the information and share it. It's been taking place amongst all our communities, and I have to say it's pretty humbling again how different communities are stepping up to responding to these needs. So on the cost of living website, on the Isle of Wight Council website, there are over 35 warm space locations that people are able to access during this difficult winter period. They're all listed there. There is a national website for warm spaces. They're having some slight difficulty in actually loading every location across the whole of UK. But we are obviously able to share that information locally. The key point for us is, as Councillor Stevens said earlier, having a website is obviously crucial in our digital age, but recognising that a lot of those who might benefit from the services listed are going to need access and support, personal, face-to-face to do that. So our staff, our frontline staff in particular, are going to be key in terms of their caseloads and in terms of offering that support. And obviously we work as a corporate entity to try and enable that right across the frontline services. I think it's also worth crucially noting our partners, particularly in health, crucially responding to some of those risks and concerns as well. And we obviously seek to coordinate through the cost of living website all of that support that's available from those different agencies. But yeah, happy to take any questions, Councillor.
Thank you. I didn't forewarn Suzanne that I'd be asking her to speak, so I'm going to ask her in front of you all whether she'd like to just touch in on the pantries and the locations of those and how we're doing with that. So Suzanne, if you're there.
Yes, I was forewarned, so through some mechanism it got to me. So I can talk to you very quickly about the support that we've offered so far through the Household Support Fund. So the Household Support Fund is money that came from the Department for Work and Pensions, the last round of which ran from March this year through to September. Isle of Wight were allocated £1.1 million out of that fund, and there are strict criteria set by DWP for what the money can be used for. It's primarily to provide direct financial support to households, those households the most in need, with food, energy and water bills. And for this last round of the funding, we had criteria set that meant that we had to spend at least a third of the funding on households with children, at least a third of the funding on pensioners, and the remaining third we had some discretion, but had to support a variety of vulnerable groups. We offered support to over 24,000 Isle of Wight citizens through the various forms of support that we put in place. So just to give you some highlights, 5,000 eligible households with children were given food vouchers for the Easter school holiday period. 3,200 applications were processed by the Revs and Bens team, with people in receipt of particular benefits seeking support. 52% of those applications resulted in individuals meeting the criteria and being issued a voucher. A further 2,000 vouchers were issued directly to pensioners to support them with the cost of food. We provided grants to community organisations, 31 different community organisations, a number of those that I've heard colleagues mention this evening, and they delivered support through those grants to 14,000 households across the island. We've got 3 community pantries set up on the island, and we provided support to them both with the cost of food, but also by entering into a contract on their behalf with an organisation called Bid Food. So they sell bulk food, which means that when the pantries run low on food stocks, they can access that arrangement and buy bulk goods at kind of trade price to support vulnerable households accessing via that means. We provided funding to Citizens Advice, which meant that they could provide support to 200 households with utility costs most specifically, but they also managed to work with individuals who had run up arrears with their utility bills, and debt relief orders were put in place that meant that £226,000 worth of debt was relieved from Isle of Wight citizens. So let's just give you a bit of a flavour of what we've achieved with the Household Support Fund. Very shortly, we will be taking a decision through CMT and on to Cabinet about the next round of funding that we've been issued, which takes us from the beginning of October through to the end of March next year. And we've been working across partners alongside Laura and colleagues, alongside Chris and colleagues, with how we can use that funding to best effect for Isle of Wight residents. Thank you.
Chairman, I think that gives you a flavour on what's been going on and what is going on currently, and future-wise. What I would say is I did note the paper that your statutory scrutiny officer wrote, and I did note paragraph 10. If you'd like to look at paragraph 10, colleagues, there is an area which says the council intends to allocate funding to a range of support that would ensure a variety of households benefit. This is likely to include, and then it goes through a list. This has got to be said that it's got the Isle of Wight Council, indeed local government as a whole throughout England and Wales, is hitting hard times, and we have to be very clear on what we're spending our money on and how we're allocating the funds. Now, you can see there are a number of items there that we would like to contribute to and really want to contribute to, but no decision has been made at this moment in time. Basically, we're tied into a situation with regard to our financial position, and we know, as you well know, with your household bills, that energy prices are still on the up and up, and as are indeed mortgages, etc., etc. So we've got a situation where finances could be very tight for this authority, as they will be for others. So we have to be extremely careful on where we're going with this, and this might well be considered by yourselves as where should we direct funding if we have it. And I think this is some of the hard decisions that will have to be made in the future. But I hope by bringing in 2 or 3 senior staff responsible for their own areas of service, that it's made you realise that the poignancy of working together and pulling together. I mean, I had the information down here, but you didn't really want me to drift on about it. You wanted to hear from those people that are actually out there providing the service and actually responsible for those areas, and with their teams doing a damn fine job for the island. I'll leave it at that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Chris. I will open it to questions if there is any, but I mean, yeah, there's lots of, Michael, that's a surprise. Councillor Lilly, I'll come to you in a second. I mean, lots of good work going on there, and I mean, lots of good work, and well done to all those involved. But as I'm sure it probably does everybody, it makes my heart sink to think that that's the sort of help we have to do often. We're probably still missing people. I mean, when you look at things like the Easter holiday food vouchers, to be eligible to have children on free school meals, you have to have a household income below £7,400 a year. You know, these are people that are already quite desperate, and it's not going anywhere. And I think this is an important wake-up call for, as we've been told, the next 2 years is going to be just as tough, if not tougher, for all 39 councillors really to work together on this. I've got a nasty feeling we're going to have to change the way we prioritise how we better serve our residents. Councillor Lilly.
I wanted to make a point and then I'll ask a question, but I think we need to put into context, you know, during COVID, it was the Isle of Wight Council in collaboration with the parish and town community councils and the voluntary sector that got the support out. That is what's now happening within that. And in fact, a number of our parish and town councils and organisations like PAN have mobilised probably quicker than the Isle of Wight Council was mobilised. In a lot of cases working together, you have in Ryde, you've got the library, which is that warm hub, but it is Ryde Town Council that's funded a community development worker to actually work within the communities, particularly the deprived communities, to build that, and actually looking to funds within that. We've got this, you know, Ventnor, West White, in Cowes, you've got this mobilisation, and it's the voluntary sector and their volunteers, right? They're actually manning these foods, places, warm places within that. And we need to really recognise that and work together. The mechanism, which was initiated again, not by Isle of Wight Council, but initiated by the voluntary sector, of a monthly meeting on Zoom that brought all those different organisations together. And that is what is actually happening now. And we need to recognise that and actually not say that we're actually in collaboration and partners. A lot of the cases, it's going to be the parish and town councils that will have the free money to move very quickly to help 500 quid to a local group and doing that. We have to recognise Isle of Wight Council hasn't got the mechanism to act quickly within that. I will mention public health, but public health has got the small grants fund on mental health, which is the second round is going out. A lot of that will actually go towards the cost of living. And that last time provided 17 grants to organisations that are now mobilising, things like the Veterans Hub, Community Spirit in East Cowes and everything. These bodies were actually helped and are more coming. But we should be a facilitator to that grassroots support, because it's the neighbours helping neighbours that is what actual people need within that. My particular question is, you mentioned a community grant fund to enable local pub projects. I would like to know more about that, because that's the first time I've heard about that, and no one in Ryde knows about that particular fund. So I'd like to, and I'm sure other areas might not know. So I'd like to know more information about that fund. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Cameron.
So obviously town and parish councils are quite well aware, I believe, of the warm hubs, but less so of the living well schemes. I think it may be worth making sure town and parish councils are in the loop with that, whether something's sent through me and I can distribute that to all our town and parish councils. I think that's key, that town and parish councillors and the councils know if that van is coming to the area, then that can be publicised through our mechanisms, and we can point people in the right direction. I think another thing that's been really successful for us is that Connect for Community funding. East Cal's been managed to get 15k, which we've given out through schools and the community pantry, something that is helping people there and then, because we know the people that need that funding. So I think, again, it's making sure that we have those close partnerships and links with the town and parish councils, but also the schools and their staff, making sure we can get the funding out if it's available to those that need it most, because those are the people that know who needs it. And, you know, is there any more of that Connect 4 funding available? I know grants were just mentioned, but that has been a lifeline to many.
Thank you. That's some good questions to be. Do you want to respond now, or do you need a formal response? Oh, Suzanne. Bring Suzanne Smith in.
Yeah, I can answer those questions. So firstly, in relation to the community grant funding, every time we've launched a round, we have accompanied that with a variety of different press releases, and we've also sent a briefing pack to all town and parish councils, as well as a vast array of other partners. With the previous grant round, I also hosted a member briefing one evening to ensure that those councillors that wanted to understand the programme of work better were able to do so. We'll do that again with the new money, so there'll be extensive communications that will go out, and we are recommending to CMT and to Cabinet that there will be a future grant round. When we receive when we set that fund up, we consider applications every week, and payment is made to the recipient within a further week. So we are able to get that money out to organisations that can then directly support residents very, very rapidly.
Thank you. Councillor Love.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. Yes, I think it's really important that we all recognise, every single one of us anyway, that this winter is going to be a particularly difficult time. So public health are particularly pushing out messages about keeping warm, not turning the heating off, but trying to heat one room well, looking after your neighbours, the general things that we would want to keep pushing out. There's a number of reasons why we do that. One is because we know that when people get cold, we then end up with hypothermia, we then end up with more people in care, in hospital admissions and so on. So the message is be neighbourly, look after each other. The van cam is kind of a fluid vehicle. It's more likely to be reaching out into communities which are isolated rather than the larger towns, to be fair. Those rural communities cut off, it's fair to say, but it's still in the development. I think it's fair to also say that we asked Public Health to put 100,000 on one side to be able to try and resource some of these particular pop-up satellite groups as we move further into the winter. It's not immediate money at this moment, but it's for things like an organisation, I'll just use a church for instance, who would want to be open to support its community but can't afford the heating and lighting. Those types of projects in order to facilitate moving forward. I think it's really important that we remember that we've got a crisis at the moment within our adult social care and hospital discharge scheme. The crisis is staffing, so we have to do everything that we can to limit the impacts that come from that into our services. And finally, I think, you know, there's no secret that we're still a bit confused about what the government is doing in terms of funding, particularly around adult social care. We've had nothing yet really for adult social care in terms of the promised billions from Boris. We don't know if that's coming or not coming. The important bit now to be lobbying on, if we can, through our different ways, is the 500 million that was promised for adult social care in terms of the winter pressures and so on. We believed that we were getting about 1.2 million in that, but then in another switch, because of the chaos of what's happening in Westminster, we now believe that we'll only get 40% of that 1.4 million directly, and the other 60% is going to the integrated care system. So we need to work really closely with those integrated care systems so we can wrestle some of that money back into what we need in order to deal with our pressures within cares. So we've got lots and lots of unknowns, but by working together, we can help keep people safer. There is no doubt about it that if people turn off their heating and they don't stay warm, we will see an increase in deaths. That is an absolute statistical fact. That's the bit that we're asking our media and everybody else to keep hammering away. Look after your neighbours, keep safe, stay warm.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Any further comment? Councillor Stevens, I'll give you the last word. Oh no, Councillor Christensen. I'll let Councillor Christensen go first.
I was just going to say, I had met one of the Living Well outreach support workers in the south the other day, so that was really useful. Are we going to have the locations, the dates of the hub, the bus, so that we can put that out into the community? And will there be data to inform us how many interactions we've had with those people and the effectiveness of it afterwards, please? Thank you.
Councillor Christensen, yes, there will be a programme for where the hub will be operating and when, and we've got some quite tightly controlled key performance indicators for the service so that we can measure not only the number of interactions it's having, but the outcome that that has for local people. We've proceeded with a soft launch purely and simply because we don't want it to become overwhelmed and set the service up to fail. It's one support worker and one mobile hub, so we need to manage its introduction quite carefully. My team will be liaising with the relevant people further down the line to set up that programme so that throughout the winter everyone has an opportunity to access that really needed service.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. And thanks to the officers that contributed. Thanks to Councillor Love. Thanks to the committee members of the Corporate Scrutiny Committee. We've been invited along to demonstrate what's going on at this moment in time and what we hope to bring forward. This should be an ongoing situation, and what I would implore you to do is to come back, give us feedback, give us some information, concerns if there are any. Let's hope there's not too many of those, but let's try and keep on pushing this thing together so that we keep our residents as safe as we possibly can throughout these winter months. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Stevens. The hand raised, was it, Councillor Lilly? Briefly.
I think it's important that we look at the comms of getting a message out to as many of people in the community that if they're in difficulty, there is help this winter. And I also think as councillors, one of the things we're doing in Ryde is actually having regular councillor surgeries along with the CAB, the police and other agencies together that will be at actually Ryde Library on a regular, basically daily basis, to be able to make sure that if individual cases need advocating in wards, they get help and they get advocation. We don't want deaths. We don't want people to starve in our community. We don't want people to get cold. I think if we get the message there is help out there, and we as all councillors, I'm going to be at least once a week helping make food in Warmbank in my ward. I'm sure all of you will get out there and do that. We will get our community through this and also build on very strong resilience and community spirit for the future.
Okay, thank you. It is a very important work, as I say, and it's quite a grim task, I know, but thank you to all those involved. Moving on to point 8, which I wouldn't give it headline billing, but I think the next item is headline billing. So quarterly performance report for quarter 2. Who's got that one? Councillor Jarman.
Well, first of all, I'm very disappointed that I'm not getting headline billing, but this is the regular quarterly report we do of all of our numbers. It's a very good tracking exercise for us in terms of how we're proceeding. There's nothing in particular that I really wanted to bring out this evening, but if you do have any questions, very happy to take them, or indeed within any of the appendices, I'm sure many of my colleagues will be able to help as well.
Any questions? I've got a couple sort of observation type questions, if you like. Adult social care is largely red, and I know Councillor Love will be able to tell me at length why. A lot of it has been mentioned about recruitment and financing, and it doesn't seem to be, I don't think, from hearing what you said, Councillor, a satisfactory answer at the moment. That was really just to clarify why everything is looking red rather than to criticise. Please feel free to correct me if that's incorrect. And the other is freedom of information requests. There seems to be an awful lot of them. Is this something we can do about making information, and I know it's impossible almost because people seek different information in different ways, but can we make more information available to reduce that number? Because whilst it is important our residents get as much information as possible, maybe we could head it off by providing information in advance, or is there anything we can do around that? I think because I think it's officer time is a lot of the problem, isn't it, with freedom of information requests?
Well, I'll let Carl answer on the second one, and Wendy may want to say something on the FOIs as well. But for mine, the reason why I think we get so many FOIs, and I pick this up from my own community, and perhaps other councillors do as well, is the need that we need to be very open about what we're doing. If we are open and transparent, as we so much want to be, then people will not need the recourse to an FOI to obtain that information. And I think part of it is that we are still seen, it's a very common theme I get back at my surgeries every Thursday. We are still seen as being remarkably inaccessible and closed to that degree of scrutiny which the public expect. And perhaps the conversation today reflects some of that. Wendy, do you want to add anything to it? No. All right. Carl, why is it?
We've just come back from Manchester from the National Conference of the Children's and Adult Social Services, it's not it's a problem which we're all experiencing right across the United Kingdom. There's a lot of competition that's happening out there for the staff that is available, and that happens locally as well. It's important that we make sure that we work as an integrated system so that we don't compete against each other, because it's a finite resource at the moment. What we don't want is one body advertising for 10p an hour more than another body, because otherwise we steal from one to pay for the other. We're in a very difficult position. I know that my officers have been working really, really hard to fill the gap where we can. We are having to use agency staff. There's no other way around it. But what we really need is the fix that the government promised us. And until we actually have some clarity about not even so much of how much money's arriving, but when it's arriving, then we can plan around that and move forward. Those are the real issues, and they're governmental issues, without which. So it's no secret. I have told Bob Seeley, our MP, I told him on Friday, that we have fallen off the cliff. We are not standing on the cliff anymore. We have fallen off the cliff in terms of we must have more funding to be able to resource and pay our staff better to attract more people in, and so that we can then look beyond our own shores at recruiting people into the business. And very clearly, there are some other things which are not about funding, which are about career structures for people coming into the industry of care, so that it's a professionalised care rather than the poor public perception of working in a profession. £9.50 an hour in some areas, you know, we can't compete against Sainsbury's. We really need the government to step up and give us a professionalism and to give us some money, or the bottom of the cliff is coming. It's that simple. Because, you know, I'm not running away from that. I'm not hiding that. And Bob Seeley agreed with me on Friday that he would go and see the minister to have a discussion. Well, I'm afraid the time for talking is finished. We actually need the money, and if it's not coming tomorrow, they need to tell me when it's coming, so that we can at least say we can plan on a deficit then to reach point X. That's what we really need. And I'm not trying to be political about that. That is the position that we're in. We cannot generate the money from our own island population. 1% of adult social care, 1% of tax is equivalent to around about 900,000. You can see what our bill alone. So if you just think about adult social care in terms of a 2.5% settlement budget that we put in, and actually if it's settled at 6%, that adds £2 million. Where is that money coming from? Because it's not there on an annual recurring basis at the moment. So those are some of the things that we are grappling with. I'm pleased to say that my director and I, we're really on top of it. We can't do much about it until the government actually decides where, how and when, because it certainly can't come from the population of the people who are already, as we've all argued, really, really struggling quite a lot. But we will do the very best with what we've got and keeping people alive this winter. It might sound doom and gloom, but that was the mood in Manchester, and we're not on our own. There's a lot of councils of all political persuasions in exactly the same position. So government will have to do something, and that's what I'm asking us to keep lobbying our MP and anybody that you know that you've got personal contacts with that can get us that money. Please do that.
Thank you,
Councillor.
Councillor. Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Quirk, then Councillor Bacon.
There's a certain sense of deja vu here. Every year we come in and we look at the figures, and every year there's pressures on adult social care, pressures on children's services. Every year leisure has underperformed in terms of revenue, and every year we've not allowed enough for the salary increases. Are there really exceptional circumstances, or have we got it a bit wrong in terms of pressurising people to put in realistic amounts and then accepting what are realistic amounts in the budget? And are we looking at ways that we can actually turn this around? 2 years ago, Michael might remember, we looked at placements of children outside of the regular commissioning process. There were 8 of them. We actually looked at it. They were actually all legitimate. There was no backhanders as far as anyone could see, but they all cost over £500,000 each.
Yes.
And all of them off island, because we didn't have the facility here. And there's things like that that we do need to be looking at, because can we do it differently to save money?
I'll let Councillor respond, and I'll come to Councillor Bacon.
Thank you so much for that, because you're actually right on the money in terms of what we're thinking. Our staff over the last 10 years of austerity have become experts at stretching £1 into £2. They've really gone the extra mile to do that. We've now reached a point where that stretching can't stretch anymore. But you are right in terms of how we are trying to look at managing things differently, and that's what collaboration has happened. That's why such a lot of collaboration is happening now with NHS. We struggle with our silos sometimes, but we are getting better at managing money. We have a number of people who cost this local authority in excess of £1 million a year to look after. We're looking at ways of how we can address that. The problem is that as we've moved forward with, if you like, the privatisation of care across the whole of the United Kingdom, it's become a business, and the business makes money. And so part of the discussion in Manchester that we had was around a very senior level, was around actually it should be not for profit in terms of care rather than profit organisations. So that's part of the problem we have. And every time, and I'm not criticising the agencies, because every time we employ a care agency to come in, the bank staff and so on, that pay more money than our staff, we actually undermine ourselves. We exacerbate the problem, because more people are going to work for that type of service with more flexibility, whereas actually we can only pay this amount of money here. That's what we can pay. End of. We can't go beyond that, because we have to set a legal budget. You are right about, we allowed a 2.5% budget, but that was actually, to be fair, within all, that was within our reach at that time. It's now not in our reach because of the events that have happened in the last 6 to 8 months, with the economy and inflation and so on. So none of us could have predicted that, no matter who we were. That is the matter that we're dealing with right now, and we need to be prepared in adult social care for some very difficult decisions about funding as we move forward, unless government steps in, because as I've already said, we don't have the ability to generate that money unless we significantly close down lots of other things, which has happened in some of the local authorities that we heard in Manchester, leisure centres closing because they can't afford gas bills and so on and so on and so on. You know, we're having to consider perhaps some of those. I'm not saying that we're going to do it, but we're having to think about that kind of approach now, because if you haven't got the money coming in, we still have to keep people alive. And my teams here, they have a statutory responsibility to keep those services going. It's not an if and a maybe. We can't do what we did perhaps here earlier today when it was quite cold here and turn the heating down in the care home. It is not allowed. So we're having to do a lot of juggling. It is complex. We're doing it with our partners. And I think there will be a much more transparent conversation to be had with everybody, the entire council, as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bacon, your microphone off.
Thank you. I'm actually coming in on the FOI point. I didn't catch your eye in time. I note your question, Councillor Quigley. Of course, there was a report before scrutiny at the last meeting which dealt with quite a lot of these issues, and I was just trying to bring it up on my computer screen, which just decided to go black. But while the report dealt with, most of it dealt with how the requests are processed and dealt with, it did point out that comparably we don't get a greater number than other authorities locally. There are things that affect the numbers of requests received, and obviously one of those is whether there's something that's controversial or public attention grabbing. And as the report noted, if there are such issues arising, because obviously they prompt often questions from the media are able to put in FOI requests as much as any other individual, then service managers are advised that if there's an issue of that nature coming up, please consider publishing more if you can. There's obviously a lot of information out there. I think the comment I'd make slightly not disagreeing with Councillor Jarman, but taking a slightly different tack, is that it's sometimes not that the information isn't there, it's sometimes a bit difficult to find it. I think that's perhaps more often the problem.
Thank you, Councillor Bacon. Any other questions on quarterly performance, or should we move on to Councillor Lilly? You've got 37 seconds.
On page 41, there was about the visit to the Islands Forum, and there had been some communication about the conversations I think the leader had with Ofgem, and there was quite, I think, some interesting things on that. And I'd just like to ask what has progressed from those discussions with the other islands, because we are an island and it's important for that conversation. And has there been anything particularly from the discussions with Ofgem to come here? Because this island could be on energy self-sufficient in the future if it sorted out the problems of East Cowes power station and the cables. We could actually be using particularly tidal and solar in the future, and we could be exporting energy as well as actually becoming self-sufficient, especially with the new technology and storage. So is Ofgem coming to the island to have those discussions with the Isle of Wight?
We'd like to take that one. Oh, hang on, we've got fighting over it. Wendy or Councillor Bacon?
Thank you, Chairman. As Councillor Lilly quite rightly points out, we did have a conversation with Ofgem as part of the Islands Forum. At that meeting, the Chief Executive from Ofgem agreed that he would be prepared to speak with the various local authorities from islands around the table. We followed that up with a letter to him and a request to discuss issues such as those that have been highlighted by Councillor Lilly, issues around the opportunity to develop local energy markets, which would give us much more flexibility around what we can provide on island, and some of the issues that that links to in terms of local flexibility around charging and fees in terms of energy generation as well. We're waiting to hear back for confirmation on a date in terms of when he will be available to have a further discussion and a detailed discussion with us on that.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, well, she'll move on to item 9, pre-decision scrutiny. Item A, dispose of council owned employment land at Kingston Marine East Cowes. Who's taking that one? Chris Ashman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And can I first of all provide apologies to Scrutiny in terms of the short notice of the paper, and that reflects the speed we're working at on this project, and also an appetite to protect the confidentiality of the parties involved. We're happy to obviously take any questions in relation to the paper, Chair, and obviously seek Scrutiny's comments then to advise Cabinet's decision on Thursday.
Okay, thank you. So there is still some, I'll come to you, Councillor. Yeah, there's still some information that we haven't been made aware of because it's confidential for commercial reasons. So it might be a case of doing as we did with the floating bridge earlier on in terms of a list of questions, but any that can be answered now, then please do. Councillor Quirk.
The paper doesn't really tell you anything. It's all summed up in the first paragraph. Without the appendix, it's meaningless. And if you're going to make any serious scrutiny of this, the members have to see the appendix. I personally think we should have an informal meeting in camera and actually be briefed appropriately so that we can actually make recommendations with some sound knowledge, because there's nothing there. It's all smoke and mirrors.
Any further? Councillor Spink.
Yeah, I would simply like to say that I agree with, if I may, with Councillor Quirk. It doesn't really seem to me that corporate scrutiny can comment on a proposal to dispose of Kingston Marine Park when all we know really is, in somewhat vague terms, it's going to be used in the employment sector. We have no idea as to the identity of the 3 developers. We have no idea as to the sum that the council will receive. What is it that we're being asked to look at, quite frankly?
It's a good point. And I think at this stage, this is where we did quite well at the beginning of floating bridge and say, well, actually, these are the questions we need asking as you make a cabinet decision. Because I think if we ask scrutiny-based decisions to go forward, cabinet is on Thursday, I believe. I think it's probably a sensible idea that we say, well, we need to know if you considered these questions in coming to an answer. Because you're right, I don't think we can do anything much more meaningful. It isn't our job to make the decision. Our job is to scrutinise, so it is still Cabinet's decision. So it might be useful to use this time to actually, again, formally record a list of questions that you may have to say, this is what I would like to see as part of scrutiny, if you're happy to do that. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the sorts of things that I think Cabinet need to know before making a decision are things like what sort of level of employment is going to be produced by this creative buyer from the creative industry. The price that's paid, is that a market price? Is that a fair market price, and who's made that judgment? Those are just 2 things that I think the Cabinet need to know. I don't know what's in the appendix, but it looks like they will get to see it. But I would caution against disposing of council land unless the Cabinet's absolutely confident that there is a real genuine employment benefit. And this isn't an industry that might sound very aspirational and good on paper. It might even be slightly glamorous, but is not necessarily going to lead to a significant number of jobs where an alternative buyer and an alternative industry might be able to provide those jobs, which might be more appropriate locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Cameron, and then I've got Michael, Councillor.
Obviously, this being an East Cowes area, I know the area quite well, and I think it's important that the Cabinet consider the fact that parking needs to be allocated on site, because that's at the bottom of a residential area, and there is no parking within that vicinity. A lot of it's going to be double yellowed. So if it is bringing up to 1,000 jobs, then there needs to be a level of parking that's provided for them, or a form of shuttle service from local bus stop or those sorts of things, to make sure that isn't impacting our residents in a residential area.
Thank you. So, Councillor, can you turn your microphone off? Just for a moment. Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Spink. Oh, sorry, then I've got Councillor Lilly. Yeah.
Sorry, I can give way to Councillor Lilly.
Much appreciate. That was my mistake. Oh, we'll be here all night. Councillor Spink. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Couple of other questions, it seems to me, is there's a principle to be decided, and that is whether or not where one prioritises employment opportunities or social housing. There was, I thought, and I put it in the past tense, a general principle of this council that council-owned land would be looked at to see whether or not it was viable for social, as opposed to simply affordable, social housing for rent. And I personally would take a lot of convincing that an industrial park or in employment opportunities, whilst they are important, it does seem to me that perhaps with the worsening economic situation, that taking an opportunity to provide some social housing might be the way forward. If we, and I note that in the pipeline, there are a number of disposals of council land coming up, some of which were going to be considered today, but have been bumped on now to our next meeting. And my concern is that if we don't use council land to provide social housing, we're not going to be able to provide any, because the government is not in real terms going to be giving us very much money for social housing. If we have to factor in the cost of buying land and the cost of instructing or contracting with a private developer, the housing will at the very best be so-called affordable, as opposed to social housing. By social housing, I mean people on the housing register get a look in. And so I think there's a very important principle to be determined by Cabinet, and I'd like some answers to those principles. I think one also has to be extremely careful, if I may say so, about selling it to a developer with, say, a restrictive covenant to provide employment opportunities. Restrictive covenants have been weakened, as I understand it, considerably as a matter of law. And once a person owns a site, it's relatively simple now, as far as I can see, to have a restrictive covenant listed. What I don't want to happen is that this land is sold to a developer. The developer then puts in a financial hardship, which most of the time we're not allowed to see. And before we know it, there are shishi apartments or something being built, which will be not to the benefit of islanders, in my view. So I'd like answers to some of those questions, please.
Councillor Lilly, then Cameron, and then Cam.
I think the 2 points that were raised by Councillor Robinson, we need to know how much we paid for it and how much we're going to sell it for. And I think that's, important. I think there's also an issue probably for the audit committee as well. And we also need to, yes, look at the jobs. I particularly think we need to look at employment creation as a committee on this island, and where we're actually putting the training in that for our future young people, because we want young people not to leave the island and get their careers. We want them to actually stay here within that. And within the cultural industries, there is quite a lot of jobs involved in filmmaking, considerably if you actually sort of, look at places like Boreham Wood and everything. And this country is getting, and there is actually a lot of interest already on the island. There are several new film companies, and that is actually emerging because actually we're a very good location for films. And I think that we should be working with universities and things and looking at the opportunities in the pipeline for people in new job creation. And I think we need to have a paper. I haven't seen a paper really about the jobs now that we need to create on the island. On the island, there was a paper some years ago about green jobs, and we could look about 2,000 jobs that could actually come from the green economy. We needed one on cultural industries, the engineering, etc., because we need to move the low paid economy of our workers, because that's a reality, to high professional jobs. And I think that's where we need to go. So I think we need the scrutiny of the context as well as looking at the land.
Just to be clear, it says creative industries in the report, not filmmaking specifically. So I'm assuming you've made a link to something. Okay, fair enough. Sorry, so where were we? I've got Cameron, then Councillor Love.
It was just on a similar point that Councillor Spink made about enforcing the terms of sales. Because if we were to sell it to someone in creative industry, what would then stop them selling it on to, like you've said, luxury condos? Because that's a prime bit of riverfront there. Because of course, housing is a priority, as is making sure we've got high-paid, high-skilled jobs. So making sure that any terms of sale has got some form of enforcement around that, making sure that that is what happens there, and it's not sold on 6 months down the line for more money than they bought it for.
Yeah,
to me. Well, not suddenly occurred to me, but I've remembered I should have said it. And that is simply this, that I'm not in the least against employment opportunities. Of course I'm not. I just want to make sure that the matter has been looked at, as it were, in the round. And in the paper, it says rather briefly that it's no longer considered suitable as a shipbuilding or a boat building site. Mainly because of restrictions on the various protected sites in the river. And I just wondered whether or not that's been properly and fully looked at, because there are very few sites with deep water access or relatively deep water access. And my understanding is, I may be wrong, that until this concern about specially protected sites was raised, it was going to be given to boat building. And indeed, I think the foundations I've read somewhere for a crane were put in under a previous planning consent. So I just feel that this is an important matter. It's a matter of principle as well as practical application. And I really do think before the cabinet takes a decision, really they should be fully informed of all of this information.
Thank you. That's a fair point. Well, Councillor Love and Councillor Quirk.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. She makes some really, really good points about the site. I think I was involved in some of the original discussions with this, with the previous administration, and some of you probably were as well. The site was bought for 600,000 by Isle of Wight Council from Homes England, who'd spent roughly about 5 million on it to put it into the position. The due diligence was not done by them in terms of the river. And because of the special interest around there, people talk about worms in the mud, but it's much more than that. There's seahorse colonies and all kinds of things. So it cannot be touched in the way that was originally designed, and that was imposed by the Environment Agency, not a local constraint. So just to give that bit of background, I do agree completely. You could actually put a covenant on it, which is actually covenanted to the people of the town, which then means that all of the community or the communities, word that however you want to, then have to be consulted about any change of use other than in the future. So that's a little bit more protection. There's different types of covenants, which I only learned about this afternoon, thanks to Councillor Jarman, who knows a little bit more about that, but that's besides the point. I think the important thing is that the site was given to shipbuilding specifically, and it was given with conditions from Homes England at that time, who were homes and communities at the time, not just for there. So employment, the reason that that site was given is it's part of an envelope of the whole area, including Hawthorne Meadows and the whole. And so that was the element that was dedicated specifically, along with the power station bit, that was for employment. And the homes that have been built are part of that package. I think the point is that at this time, present time, the electrification of shipbuilding is huge across the United Kingdom. The Isle of Wight, unlike many other places, has not built on its sites where shipbuilding once took place, which means that the revitalisation of that can occur. And we see that with Medina Yard particularly. The site that we talk about was never deep water. That was part of the problem. It was never deep water, it was shallow water. And so therefore an alternative solution now has to be brought forward, which it's not in my ward, it's adjoining my ward. I'm not really privy to either, to be honest, although there's been some discussions around that. I think what matters is that there's no point in having houses if we don't have highly skilled, highly paid jobs, and so we agree with ourselves there. I asked the question too at one point, what about building some houses on him? The problem is, if you were to build houses in that particular position, no builder would build houses of the 125 to 150,000 because of where they are. It is £1 million houses if you go in that particular area. And I have the same problem with another site in East Cowes, which overlooks Cowes Estuary, exactly the same issues that you're pronouncing, because how can we ensure that the builder builds what it is that they say that they're going to deliver? And I personally would rather not sign over the properties until I could see a proper plan that had been approved through planning to say that they're going to build A, B, C, or D. Otherwise, they do exactly what Cameron has said. They come along, they see the value of the land, and they see £1 million houses rather than. So that's really important. So there's lots of issues around this, but that I just hope that that helps you in some particular way through my involvement with that. But the property was bought for 600,000. It's in a place where some residents were promised sea views, and then that was never the case that was going to happen, really. So for me, because we've got this revitalisation of shipbuilding, although it's waterlocked because of what's happening, there's still the ability to have some marine industries based within that, but I don't know what the intention is. So I just hope that that just gives a bit of insight, but I do agree with you.
It does, if I may say so. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to give Councillor Quirk the last word on 9A.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Two things. One is the 2.5 acres that you can buy back for £1. Knock £1 off the price and keep it. So you've got it, and you haven't got to worry about that in the future. The second thing is you can put an artsy type establishment virtually anywhere. I can't see why they would need to be adjacent to the river, except that some of those development sites are a bit cheaper than elsewhere. And that isn't a good reason for putting it there. But there are other big, there are other big sites around the place. It could be anywhere. When the previous administration was looking at this, I was on the regen board. We had not done to death that there's no way of getting boats into the water. I don't know if you've done more work on that, but there were other options about sort of super crane type things that lift it and drop it further out that weren't investigated or costed. So if you haven't done all of that work, I would caution getting rid of what's probably the last site for shipbuilding other than the one that's already approved on the other side but not been built. So you've got very limited expansion of shipbuilding on the island. This is a site that you could do it possibly if you can get a crane that can drop the boats further out into the river.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Moving on now to 9B, Wightcare options review.
Did you, Chairman,
Oh, sorry.
what outcomes do you want?
Sorry, so
from
the
that
outcomes, so I
discussion?
think we've got a list of questions there that we want responses to. Now, in terms of time frame, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but I think what we're asking is that the Cabinet have considered those questions before making a decision on Thursday. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. So 9B, Wightcare options review, who's got that one? Carry on, Councillor Love.
The Wightcare review paper that's been brought to you for your comments. I think the paper is fairly self-explanatory. We earlier this year we spent quite a lot of time, didn't we, at various different meetings talking about this. I think it was the 8th of May, was it, when we had the meeting. So just very briefly. So it's a service which is provided to approximately about 2,100, 2,200 people per year, which helps them to remain in their own homes. It's an enabling living and so that they can live independently. It has a range of various different services which are not provided by many other people, including home support. From my perspective, sitting here as a councillor, it allows people to remain at home in their own comfort, in their own surroundings. It gives reassurance to families. It's not just about the individual who it's servicing. It's quite unique. It actually prevents hospitalisation. It prevents onward referral into adult social care. It's a very important protective factor, and it's the protective factors that we need to keep building on as we move forward. So the worst thing you can ever do to anybody is say, by the way, you've got to leave your own home and move into a care home, leaving all your possessions and all your life behind. So from a mental health well-being perspective, it's the absolute model. This is a model which is supported right across the whole statute. The UK, I should say, is that we're celebrated for what we do here. What really matters now is that we actually, through this paper enables it to move on to the next stages of its development. So, as you know, the service isn't equitable as it currently stands. We've been trying to work out a process of moving forward so that it becomes self-sufficient, self-funding. In the current market, we have to say that that's going to be challenging in the current workplace and everything else that's happening. But still, we need to move forward to try and achieve that, to reduce some of the costs there. You know, what I wanted to say to you is that there's a figure in there, which some of you are probably going to pick up on the 54% in terms of which some people are interpreting as we would have to increase costs by 54% in order to make it viable and self-sustaining. In actual fact, that's not right. Okay, what we're really saying is that we have to grow the business by 54%. And that's a mixture of 2 or 3 different things. And quite simply, we say that on one hand here, we have to bring more people into the service, which of course brings that percentage point down. And on the other hand, which is a bit more contentious, we have to say to the integrated care systems that actually, you know, what did our service save you? Well, it saved the ambulance service, which is highlighted about £650,000 in a year in terms of call outs to people that had collapsed at home, where our service personnel went in, did that, came back, and that is a big impact for the NHS. It has a big impact for us. But what we now need to say to them is this is the value. Can we have a little bit of money, please, towards that, which brings that percentage down again. It'll never zero it out, but so I don't want people to be hung up by the 54% chart and is the difference between where we are now and where we need to be in 2 years, because there's more than one way of getting to that by growing the service, and that will bring it down. It is inevitable that costs are going to have to rise. You know, we've already had these conversations in the previous funding round. Because that's the way forward for it. I don't know whether if you would allow my director to say just a couple of words about that. Is that okay, Chair, or not?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. And I echo the points that Councillor Love has made. I simply seek to reinforce a few of them, if I may. Firstly, the review that was undertaken of the Wightcare service was undertaken by the TSA, who are an independent industry body. They are the advisory body for technology-enabled care through the UK, so not only reputable, but very experienced in this area. The report contains a recommendation based on their findings that rather than looking to externalise Wightcare or commercialise that offer at the moment, we should use the next 2 financial years to stabilise the service and to support it to achieve a financial break-even, reducing the need for dependency on public funds. I will forever be disappointed that, unlike in health, social care is means tested. In a perfect world, people would be able to access social care as they do health, and that would be free at the point at which they need it. But that is not the system which operates within our country at this moment in time. For that reason, it's necessary that we do impose charges for some of the services that we offer. We also need to balance the imposing of those charges against ensuring that people can access the care and support that they need. And the proposals as outlined in the recommendation give us the scope to do that without increasing what we're charging to local residents to make the service either unaffordable or unattractive. Through a complete review of the service, a redesign of the offer, expansion of what that offer is to better meet individuals' needs, and through efficiencies, there is a strong likelihood based on the review that we will be able to make that service sustainable in the longer term, but also to erode the significant financial contribution that my department has to make to it from our baseline budget. Back in May, I think I made a comment in terms of that baseline budget being very stretched and not available for discretionary things moving forward. The need to preserve the adult social care revenue budget to meet eligible need within our statutory framework. Never more has that been true than it is now. The pot is shrinking, and we need to do all we can to ensure that we can continue to provide services for local people that are so very valuable for their independence and to keep them at home, but at the same time preserve the money that's available to us as a local authority to discharge those statutory functions as well. The report doesn't propose a 53% increase in fees for people who access Wightcare. It would be absolute lunacy for us as a local authority to seek to do that. And what we need to do is look at how we can change what we deliver to better meet need at an affordable price for our local residents. The definition of lunacy is to keep doing what we've always done and expect to get a different result. And this puts us into a territory of breaking that cycle with this very valuable local service to make sure that we can support people who really need support to stay at home and to stay safe.
Thank you. Any questions at all? Councillor Lee.
I think there's certain points to this. This is a very important service, and we have got an increasing demographic. The baby boomers are now coming into older age, and we have an increasing number of people living on their own as well. So I think it's very important that this service is continued, right? I think we're a long way off, in a sense. Option 1 has to be about growing these things. It might be in future years or future year that option 2 and 3 have to become reality, but initially you need to do that step forward. I would recommend that I do think this needs to go to policy and scrutiny of health and adult social care, particularly because that's the Pacific Committee and they have the other partners from the NHS, the voluntary sector, the that do need to be scrutinised to make sure that they support that. It's very important. There is real collaboration between the other sectors, particularly the NHS and particularly in integrated care, and that we can't ask those questions of those agencies here. So it should go, I believe, on the 5th of December to that relevant committee. I would ask a specific question of the 151 officer that he endorses this report because it is very important, especially in our financial position at this time, that we do seek endorsement on any proposal like this from the Section 15 officer, because he's the person who keeps us in the proper side of regulations and finance. So I do think we need to ask that we have got his endorsement of this plan, and I also think we should, from this committee, because of the financial implications, for it to go to audit committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. It will be circulated, but my understanding will be a Health and Policy Scrutiny Committee they won't make a decision on this. They'll monitor the performance. I am guessing that you've done all of the things Councillor Lee's already said, because it's a very extensive report, and I have a lot of faith in Laura and yourself, Councillor Love. But I know you had your hand up, Councillor, so please feel free to answer that.
Thank you. Yes, we've done everything that we feel that we need to do in order to satisfy that. Furthermore, the 151 officer, I don't know if he's on, sorry, I haven't got my glasses, so I can't see whether he's there. He's not there, is he? But the 151 officer has done some work in this document and has made a contribution and some alterations and amendments. Therefore, I think it's fair to assume, although I would agree, I would like actually a statement from him, if that's possible, that he endorses this. I think that would be, but he has worked on it, and if there'd have been any issues, I'm pretty sure he would have said that to us before we got to this stage. But I would actually like at this point, because of the financial unravelling of the situation that we are in nationally, to safeguard ourselves by having a statement of support from him. Be a wise thing to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do I need to move motion of formally supporting this and ask people to vote?
It's entirely up to the committee, Chairman. But what I would advise members, this report has been circulated to the Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Health and Adult Social Care for comment, and I've not received any comment formally from that committee.
Okay. So I propose that we formally support the report. Do I have a seconder? Take your pick. Thank you very much. Those in favour?
2, 3, 6, 7, 8.
Any against? Any abstentions?
Well,
Councillor Fox.
That's carried, Chairman.
Okay, so thank you. So you got our support, Councillor Love. Okay, so unless there's a really good members' question that steals the thunder of that item, that was the head of the bill. Any further members' questions? To be fair, we've got through a hell of a lot of information today, so thank you all. It was a really good meeting. I think we've got, certainly, I see that as a lot of scrutiny going forward in terms of what we're asked to do. So if that's the case, thank you all very much. It does sound quite unpleasant going out there, so I hope all of you are in a vehicle and you're not cycling or anything such, but thank you all and see you all again soon.